Okay. I'm live, I believe. Hello, everybody. I was fully prepared to do this first stream to nobody, just to get the recording done, just to have a practice. Really, I've never done one of these before. I'm Another Magento Dev, and this is the Debug live stream or podcast, or whatever you want to call it. Don't know how long it's going to last yet. Don't really know how it's going to pan out in terms of content, but my main idea was just for this first one to give us an anchor, something to do. I thought, why not try and do something simple like build a Magento site on the fly. In the hey, I've got a viewer, good old Mitchy. All right, Mitch, thanks for your support, really appreciate it. The first ever commenter, the first ever viewer of the first ever Debug. I think I'm going to call it a podcast. I like podcast. It's something of my age, my era. And I was just gonna walk through it. How I would do it, really. And when I say that, I mean how I would do it is, there's a couple of caveats to that. One is I do things differently pretty much every time because I've got an attention span of a cabbage. And also, it's one of the things I wanted to talk about actually, is obviously I'm a lead dev now. You know, I'm an experienced developer. I've been, a bit about me, I've been developing, working with Magento since about 2009. Magento 1, I think 1.3 I started on, might have been 1.2. Built my first production site on 1.7 in about 2010. I've owned my own agency, an e-commerce agency specialising in Magento. I'm certified. I've got a lot of experience, and with that experience comes the lead developer role, and it's not all it's cracked up to be. You end up, because you've got experience, obviously trying to pass on that experience to juniors, which means the juniors and the mid-level developers, they get all the dev work, they get all the good work, and you end up on oversight, which means, the point I'm getting to is that I don't code as much as I'd like, and I don't code as much as I used to. So this, from a personal perspective, gives me an outlet. It gives me a reason to code and to get stuck in, which is the thing that I like doing the most. So I'm conscious that I'm 3 minutes in and I haven't written any code yet, but I just wanted to say that, I mean, it's one of those sort of, it's one of them things that you never really think of as you're a dev, particularly when you're less experienced, like I have been, about climbing that tree, going from like freelancer to building teams to the more experience you get and the more knowledge you get, the less you end up doing the thing that you really enjoy sometimes, and you've got to take that. Obviously, it comes with better pay and more benefits and other things, but you know, my advice would be for anybody who's sort of looking up at them lead developer roles, thinking I want to be that, and because obviously this whole channel, this whole channel is based towards like beginners, people just getting on board with Magento. You know, people just sort of getting involved and wanting to try and find a foothold, a rung on that, get on that first rung of the ladder of being able to build Magento. Because one, it's, you know, it's taxing. It's a tough a job as a Magento developer is tough. You've got a lot of learning to do. There's a massive learning curve with it, and you know that you reap the rewards of having that knowledge in the future. So I want to be able to pass my knowledge on to, you know, junior and beginner Magento developers, and that's the whole point of this. But one of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, as you do get better, you'll probably be doing it less. So that means that you have to get even better because you get less amount of time to do things in. So anyway, without any sort of further ado, right, so I got this. I think it's brilliant. I just downloaded a free Figma template this morning. I thought, I'll tell you what, I'm going to build something that's unlike anything that I've ever built before. And this is a visual that was free just on the internet. I can't remember where I got it from now, and it's got a full Figma design, and as you can see, it's like a supermarket type site. And I thought, well, that's quite cool because I've never done anything like that before. And I'm going to try and build it from top to bottom. It's nice and white and plain. So let's make a start now. Where would I start with something like this? Well, I would probably you know, as the lead on the project, if I was coding it, I'd start with like the header and the global things like the header, the footer, and then I'd maybe get a junior on doing putting the content into a page builder, and obviously we'll work out what, you know, how we divvy up those types of jobs within the agency. Within the agency, but yeah, I would just start with the header and get a feel for it. So the way I would do it, so I've just bunged a PNG of the logo in there, but I would prefer that to be an SVG. And I think as we know, and if you don't know, Magento doesn't natively support the uploading of SVGs yet, which isn't great. And I've tried modifying that functionality recently, and I didn't have much success. So there's a note in terms of getting it to go up through the uploader. So I would probably go around that in a different way. I might get to that today, which is just letting the logo be saved via a template, you know, the template file, rather than within the CMS, because I don't know how often a merchant or a client would want to change the logo, and if they did, they could come to you to do it. So I think it's one of those. I like to keep things in the CMS, you know, that belong to the client, you know, and keep them being able to edit things, and you know, so to just almost like to have that contract with them, that they look after their content and we look after the, you know, the infrastructure, the code and everything else. So there's some things though where there is a fine line, and I think stuff like logos is probably one of the ones where you could be forgiven. If you want to have an SVG, you could have that in sort of, for want of a better word, hard coded into the theme. Right, and so this is a theme that I've put together for one of my other tutorials. And it's a theme that I use. It's a boilerplate that I often sort of use in terms of its structure. I have Laravel Mix running the compilation on this, and I have touched on it in another. Well, I've done a full tutorial on it, which you could probably find on my channel, which you definitely find on my channel. And I'm gonna kick that process off. So it's dead simple. We just go for yarn watch, and this is all just sort of setting up my workflow essentially for how I'm gonna sort of start deving this header. So I'd switch, obviously you've got to run yarn mix. If you're using Gulp, it's similar, it'll be a similar setup. Also you know, any sort of task runner, you're probably with Magento 2, you want to be using the Live Reload plugin, which is just in the Google store there. So once that's in there, I'll show you what that does, just to go over it. It adds that little bit of JavaScript to that port, referencing that port there, and now it'll pick up any changes on the fly, which is a handy thing to have set up. If you want this, it's on my GitHub, so if you just search for it on GitHub, you'll probably find it, which would be, if you do a Laravel Mix Magento theme, and you'll probably find the boilerplate of that there. So in terms of setting this up, right, so I've got it was sort of just set up for another tutorial I did where I was adding some JavaScript in a back to top button, but within this styles SCSS, this is where I would use as my sort of like reference point into the theme for all my CSS. Now I won't bung everything in here, obviously I wouldn't do this, so we're going to start by just moving this to top button to sort of get to grips with the folder structure and stuff like that. Obviously this first podcast will be very much set up. There's going to be probably not much actual front end dev done, but because the setup takes longer than you think. But if you do it properly and set them foundations, your workflow in the future will always benefit from a good setup, like with anything. I've got a question in the chat from Patrick. Hello Patrick, and thanks for joining us, by the way. Have you ever used Hiver? No, I haven't. I'll look into that though. I've never used Hiver. What is it? You can get back to us in the chat. Is it a compilation tool, a bit like Mix, or because it just seems like that came in when I was talking about that? But I'll be interested to find out what that is. Always up for new stuff. If you want to bung a link in the chat to it, that'll be useful. I could check it out later on. So just to get back to this, in terms of the structure of my CSS. Obviously, you can do this however you see fit and whatever you sort of feel is going to work for you. I like to have it sort of modular and sort of component based. So I would go for something like Pages, and in Pages I would have CSS that pertains to things like the main areas. I'd say like if you need anything on your homepage, PDP, category list, and checkout, anything that is a page in and of itself. I would have the CSS in there. I would have also usually an objects folder, and objects I'd sort of count them as being things like headers, footers, nav bars, anything that's global but not quite a component. So, or what I would class as a component. Now, components, that for me is a difficult one in Magento, not because you can't build based off components. And what I mean by components is small. When I would say components, and I would say this sort of in a WordPress sense as well, is that you would have an area within the content block of your Magento website that you can reuse somewhere else. So you would build it as a component and then utilize it somewhere else. Obviously, you can do that in Magento using things like widgets, blocks, and then you can within the page builder you can call through Luma replacement, no knockout or less, Tailwind and Alpine. Tailwind. Do you know what I was thinking this morning when I got up? I'm going to do this live stream today. Shall I pop for Tailwind? Shall I try and get Tailwind working in here? Because I've had a problem with Tailwind before, and it's down to using it on layout, where it doesn't like the colon that you use within Magento. Or last time I checked, Magento's layout system didn't like the colon, and obviously you can switch that out in Tailwind config, but I've never got round to that. You could probably use a hyphen or something like that. I'd love to. Yeah, I think I'm going to get something going with Tailwind. The only drawback I think with Tailwind though, don't you find? I'm not sure whether, well, like you say, a Luma replacement. I was going to say you end up with a lot of code on your page with Tailwind, which I use Tailwind a lot for apps and PWAs and within JavaScript, like using Vue or Svelte. And I find that obviously using Tailwind within that system is not so much of a problem, because you get them sort of page speed scores inherently by using that technology. Because Magento is quite it does have the PWA has a setting to replace the colon. I'm going to look into that though, and I will do another vote for hire. Looks good. That's from Ian Harrison. Thanks for joining us, Ian Harrison. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support. Hopefully we can get a little Magento fanboy community going, and fangirl and boy, and everything in between. Anyone can be a fan of Magento. Not so much Adobe. Not a big fan of Adobe, but Magento, yeah, special place in all of our hearts, I'm sure. Tailwind, that will be good. I'm just worried about the amount of code it outputs onto the page with regards to a Magento, which as we know, you get away with a PWA because of the amount of code, the how small they are, natively. Or inherently. But so with Luma as a base, obviously it's a safe pair of hands. Yeah, I'm up for changing it. I think it's not a bad idea, to be honest. If there was if I can ever be shown anything better, I'm never dogmatic with anything like this. I'll go for it and I'll give it a go. But I'll have a go on Hiver actually. But for now, we'll just have a look at Luma, because it is for beginners. Obviously these guys in the chat, Ian, Patrick, and Mitch, they're no beginners. They know the stuff. But obviously, if we have got any beginners watching, and also beginners watching this, in the future, then Luma is a good place to start to sort of hone your skills. And the thing about it is, I think, when you use it, and you can use anything, you can use Grunt, Task Runner with less, whatever you're comfortable with. But I just like using SCSS. You find yourself writing. I find myself, I don't write that much CSS to go over Luma, particularly if, I don't know whether your designers are, any sort of more adventurous than this. I mean, that this is one of the reasons why I picked this, is because it's very much like Luma. I just wanted to sort of demonstrate maybe in this episode, I know I've rambled on for 15 minutes, but is how to just move things around in the header straight, move the search and things like that. I thought it'd be a good thing to touch on today. But then it occurred to me as I started, let's set up our theme, which I still haven't done yet. So, objects. I've sort of talked over what those are. So for now, we'll keep our objects and we'll keep our pages folder, and I'll just add a CSS file just for starters into here. I'm not sure if I'll get around to using it today, because the first thing I'm going to do, and what I would do is, and you can see I've already imported Bootstrap, and actually object. I'll tell you what else we'll have: a base folder. Base is obviously good for theme variables, which we can sort of put in at a later date for things like colours, widths for media queries and all that type of stuff. Would go into here, but for now I'm just going to add a place just so I can stick this back to top. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stick the back to top button in its own file here. I know it's overkill, but why not? Right, so I'm going to stick the back to top CSS in there, and then I can start structuring this SCSS file, the styles one, properly. And I'm just going to grab the way I've annotated it on another project, so I don't have to type it all out. But yeah, obviously the tidier the better with anything like this. Make your code as readable as possible, and it doesn't end with CSS for that. So right, so we'd have our sort of our base stuff here, and I would count, and then we'd have our vendor stuff maybe in this section, and then we'd have components, objects, so we'll have an object section, and you can just start to kind of sort of flesh this out a little bit. So the reason I've put vendor in there is because Bootstrap here, I've basically, what I did with Bootstrap to get Bootstrap in is I uninstalled it this morning, so you can see it's in there as a dependency. The reason I've put Bootstrap in is obviously it's ubiquitous and it's easy enough to use, but I just think like there is certain areas, and header's one of them, when you want to sort of, if you want to restructure it, for me there's no easier and simpler way of doing it than Bootstrap. I wouldn't want to be writing a load of CSS to be able to just restructure a header. You might find you're using it elsewhere in the application as well, and I've installed it through Node essentially, so it's in my Node modules, and you can test its working by obviously control and click, and then I'm just importing the grid from Bootstrap, nothing else, and you get all the Flexbox stuff, which can come in useful. I always don't want to. I always want to write my own grid and think I'll keep it tidy and only have the bits I need. But to be fair, there aren't many better grids than Bootstrap. Obviously, you can get founded. Obviously, there's loads of other grids, but there ain't many better. They're all sort of like neck and neck in terms of how useful they are. Object. So I just import my just to show you how to do it. So I would import my object. So this is my Copilot, which has been basically a bag of shit from Magento. I've got no good things to say about it. If anything, it just gets in your way like this and distracts you. It really needs a lot of work. I haven't used it on anything else yet, but so we'll go for objects. But up to now, yeah, for Magento, I found it a bit shit. But you don't need the SCSS extension on there. And oh yeah, look at Copilot, it's adding my semicolon for me. Thank you. Nice one. Right, so that's the header CSS in there. Right, so we'll look at some more sort of template based. Look at some more template based stuff. Just get rid of. Oh, actually, I didn't include my back to top button CSS, so it's probably not going to show. So I'll just have to do that. And I added it as an object. So I'm just going to copy and paste this down here. Obviously, if you see any mistakes I'm making as I go, because like that. My browser's just crashed, and that means the stream crashed as well. That's not good, is it? Camera's still on, and I'm wondering if it's just crashed. My stream seems to have crashed. It's still saying I'm live. Just one sec. Thanks. Right, it says I'm still streaming. Oh, for fuck's sake. Fuck's sake, what's actually going on here? No, it's all an experience, isn't it? Says people are still connected. Right, I don't know if I went off then or what. I'm really sorry. But I seem to be back. What a nightmare. My browser just crashed. Fucking. Hang on. Still streaming, fella. Oh, thanks. Obviously, I couldn't see that. That was useful. What made you use Sass with Webpack rather than Grunt or less? Oh, thanks, Mitch. Yeah, really, it was a decision I made based off the team I was working with. They all preferred Sass and almost set as a challenge to say, look, can we get Magento compiling with Sass? And at first it was with Gulp, and that sort of worked, and it wasn't great. And it was mainly, I think, a couple of the other devs that I was working with at the time, they weren't necessarily Magento devs, they were front-end devs, and they had their ways, and they wanted the way, they wanted their workflow to be how their workflow was for other applications like WordPress and stuff. So it was one of them where I sort of found another way of doing it. Yeah, it sort of led from that, really, just from that necessity. And to be honest, I don't just develop Magento. I like using Sass. I know there's no real difference. And I think at one point on one of the versions of Magento 2, they were getting real trouble with less compilation through Grunt and local. Also, through different machines, like someone was working on a Mac, someone on a PC, someone on a Linux machine, and no one could there was no consensus on how the setup needed to be. I think it was just inexperienced Magento development, really, and it sort of led to Sass. Rightly or wrongly, I know it's one of them with any of these things, with Grunt, Gulp, it's all personal preference, really. I don't see any real differences in terms of the production product. I know that in terms of workflow, if you're using Grunt and less, you can use your mixins to speed up development from Blank and Luma theme and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's basically came from that. That's the story. So we're back on and back up. My browser crashed. So if it crashes again, I'm just gonna keep going and try and open it without causing a big fuss again. So I've wasted loads of time like an idiot. Right then, so let's start by editing moving around the header. So you can do that in Magento theme. If you want, you can do it in a module. I think for the purposes of this, I'm going to keep everything in the theme, and I'm going to start by creating a default XML in here. Now, pretty much every Magento module, probably every Magento module, has a default XML for some purpose. Obviously, it's not always advisable to use it because it affects everything, and you might want to pinpoint something very specific. So the Magento theme layout does have a default module, and I can sort of show you. I like to always, I know for people that know this isn't good, but I like to always show my working out and show people who obviously are less experienced where I get these things from. So if in vendor, then you can go to Magento, and all of your modules are in here. So all of these, module-bundle, module-theme, module-category, they're all analogous to what you create in your theme with, you know, the camel case and the underscores. So you can basically, well, it's just a general guide on how you sort of extend Magento, really. So in here you've got your view, theme, front end, because we're working on the front end, and their layout. So there's the default XML. So anything in here really is up for grabs, and we can use any of it. And this is the bit that I want to sort of get hold of. And notice this is reference container as well, because this actually exists elsewhere as well. But we're gonna reference it, and then we're gonna build our own blocks inside of it, and we're gonna sort of, yeah, we're gonna piece it together. We're gonna piece our own header together. So I would always start with, you know, it's easy just to grab page, let's grab the page, and then we'll also then need, as I was saying, the reference container for the header container. So we'll grab that. Actually, we'll start, I'll just put that in there. Hey, there we go, Copilot. We'll start by getting rid of a few things. Now, I'm gonna pull this from another site, but I'm gonna need to do it in this site, and I don't know if anybody else always does this, but I basically have a tranche of shit that I just get rid of, and I do it in the default. So I get rid of sites. I don't know if this site's going to have it, but rarely the sites have compare. So I get rid of all that in here. I just bung it all in. The wish list in the sidebar, no one's ever interested in. That daft PayPal button on the right, just get rid of it. And then all of these things in the footer. Now I'm going to keep this for now. This is Nav Sections, and Nav Sections is the menu, the current menu. Now I think I remove it generally because I do normally replace the menu, and that's for performance reasons. I normally build out menus as static content rather than from the catalogue, just based off the amount of time it takes sites with massive categories to load. I'm not sure how that's going to go with this one, but in any case, right, so we'll start by removing that stuff, and we can see what it does on the front end. So if I save that and I refresh the front end, right, I've got a nice clear footer, and that's about it. So I've removed that because all this stuff is on other pages. Right then. So we've got a header container. So let's start sort of adding our own container into it. Well, yeah, that's not helpful. Not today, but thanks for the effort. So we'll have a container, and we'll call this container like something inside. And the reason that I like to have another container is because if you want to well, first of all, I want to move the navigation into the header, because it currently sits outside the header, the navigation in Magento. You can see there that Nav Sections one there. It sits outside the header, and I like to move it into the header, because then I can have the header sticky and stuff like that, and it'll all, you know, be stuck to the page, and it'll react like, if you're only, you know, otherwise you have to write sort of that you have to write this twice and make them both sticky, but I think I prefer them to be in the header. So I'm going to call this header inner container, and this is where Bootstrap might come in handy. So we could, I'll just ban this on from another one. So we've got a label. It's going to be a div, and in there we're going to have it as container fluid, and this was something specific for that other project. But yeah, we've got a Bootstrap there saying give some 5 pixels margin. Excuse me, 5 pixel margin, and then we're going to have this. We're going to stick some stuff inside this, so we need to have it ending. Now what have I? Oh yeah. Okay. Okay, so looking at our design, we've got the logo's going to stay where it is. Unfortunately, it'd have been nice to move that about, but I'm going to look at changing it to an SVG. We're going to move the search into the middle, and that's fairly straightforward to do. But what I'm going to do is, let me just have a look, see if there's a simpler way of doing it. Let's have a look how it lays out in a minute, because I know this. Right, so we've got a block search over there. We've got the mini cart. So we've got to leave that where it is. The logo's going to stay where it is. Right, yeah. So this is all, obviously, look, this is all done by CSS at the moment and floated, and it's all a little bit sort of loose. And I think why I do this, and one of the main reasons why I do this is, what I mean by do this is add the columns, add the structure via Bootstrap, is because we get to be able to put elements in their own little containers, so they're easier to sort of they're easier to deal with, they're easier to move around. So we've got our inner container, and then we're going to add a left container for the logo, and we're also going to add something in for the mobile nav. I know it's not on the designs, it might be on there somewhere, but we're going to move. Right, we're going to have container left next. So I'm just going to borrow this one so I don't have to spend ages typing it out. Container, and then in there, look at that, that's quite good. And then also, is it gonna, nice one. So we've got and I'll just check these. So we've got a central container. I'm just going to make them all fours for now, and we'll come back to other Bootstrap stuff in a sec. Right, we'll keep them as fours for now. Right, so I've got my basic structure here, and if I just refresh the front end now, right, what you should see is nothing. Nothing, and that's because they're empty. The containers are empty, so I need to put some stuff. I need to move some stuff around. And what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to move. So I'll do this from using move. So, and the first thing I'm going to move, and in Magento you've got a handy move sort of directive, where you get to move an element and you can grab it from basically anywhere and then move it to somewhere else. So this is called element logo straight away, and we're going to move that to the destination of header left. And I know it's already in the left, but we're going to be putting it inside its own container. Header left. I want to see at what point that's the header left container in it. So now I've put something, so that, there you go, now I've put something in it, it's sort of sprung to life in terms of the code that I've just written on this layout. Now I've moved, so obviously I've not put anything specifically in there, what you can see, but now I've moved the logo into it, the container hits the page. And I'm going to move the search into the middle. So move element search, you must have heard me, move search, but it's not called that, is it? So it's not too clever, is it? It's called top search. And I'm going to move that into header center and just have a look. So it's moved it. Obviously we've got to refine the tags and the CSS around it, but we've basically got, and that's all working, updating. So we've got that there, it's just down to the crap code I wrote with the Bootstrap. So it's bringing Bootstrap. So Bootstrap's working, I just need to get it working properly. And I think I get it, I basically need to put it in a row, but I'll do that in a second because I can add my row to these. It's always a problem in it with pasting things in from other projects and you can't remember why you've gone ahead and done it. So I'm going to grab the mini cart next, and I'm going to put that into right, I put it into header account before, and then I put header account into the right one, but for now I'm just going to put it into, what else have I got on this page here? The mini cart's basically the only thing that's there in it for now. and I'm going to I'll move these. I'll have a look at moving them things in a second. Right, so we'll just call it header right. So essentially, this illustrates a point really, and I don't need the after wish list right away because I removed it. So there we go. So everything's in its own container now in terms of the. And I just have to remind myself in terms of Bootstrap how I do that. I think it's row. If anyone could help us out in the chat, I think it's row with Bootstrap, isn't it? Is it row? Row with Bootstrap. Let's try it. If it is row, I can. Or is it flex now? Is it deflex? Is it flex? Or is it row? Let's try row. Yeah, it's row. Nice one. So basically, that's. I mean, when you obviously you're piecing this together, aren't you? So when you're looking at the layout, we're sort of, you know, it's structurally everything's in the right place now. It's just a case of now refining what else needs to be put into there, you know, and obviously the styling and everything else. But we're not, you know, we've come from having the search over on the left and CSS driven, and now we're moving it around. We're moving things around, and that's the thing about, that's one of the learning curves of Magento, because obviously if you're building a WordPress header, you don't have to worry about layout files. You have to. This is the way to do it for Magento, and this is one of the disciplines you have to learn, is how the layout and how containers and blocks and how it all, what the rules are basically, because there's, let's face it, there is shitloads of rules. So for now, I'm gonna leave that as that. So just test this, but you can see it's sort of full width at the minute, and I'm gonna be making it, how many pixels this is? 1260. It's going to be. So we can add some stuff in for that. Now I normally just so I get the exact measurements, this is where you can jump back into your CSS, and we could say what could we do, call it base.scss, and in base import base, and in base we would have maybe some container stuff, some global stuff. So we could have container 1260. Yeah, that's quite cool. Well done. Right, and we'll want it margin auto as well, I believe. Right, that should have done its stuff. So now on here, so this is obviously where it. Let me get rid of this for a second. Container 1260, and throughout your theme development, you end up with quite a few of these different things. Right, so that has added my container, but what did I do wrong? Is that added my container? Yeah. What did I do wrong CSS wise there? Anyone tell us? Is it because I've got? Is it because of that? Right, that's central land. Where is it? Where is central land? Can't have all. Come back to that. Come back to that. Is it something to do with the other things I've got on there? No. I can't think of that off the top of my head. I could have a look at something else that's central land on Magento. Just have a look at the classes. What have we got? So that's central land. What else have we got? What else have we got here? Yeah, that would have worked. Huh. Quite sure what's done that. I'll figure it out. Right then, so did I remove the wish list? I think I did. I'm not sure if we need that on the design. Nah, we just need an account button. There is no wish list on there for now. Okay, right then, so obviously, offline I'll put in the right categories and stuff, but we've got something to go off on now. I just want to make sure, one of the things to make sure of is to make sure everything works. I might have to just make sure everything still works in terms of the edit, because the mini cart is quite sensitive to the container that it's in. Let's just make sure it still works. Yeah, that seems to be fine. Yeah, okay, that's great. Obviously, I've got to center align that. Can't figure out why that's frustrating. Okay, so that, in terms of moving things around, obviously, yeah, there's shitloads more to be done. But in terms of moving things around and how to sort of where you're probably best off starting, in terms of getting that header in position and ready to be styled up, which is essentially what I've done here, is pretty much where I would start there. And then I might look at sort of the footer and get that structurally in place. But yeah, that wasn't that sort of, obviously I talked through it and I tested things as I was doing it, but that's not, it wasn't too, it didn't take too long is what I'm trying to get at. But this is still bothering me. Still bothering me. Padding left and right. Display flex is right because that's within it. It stumped me. I'm going to figure that out, obviously. Must be another. I must need. Wonder if I need another container. Anyway, I won't go on about that. I won't go on much longer. We're nearly up to sort of 45 minutes, which is probably good enough for this first attempt. I appreciate everybody everyone who's joined us. We've had like 21 views, which is more than I expected. I've had 5 likes, which is much more than I expected. In terms of this stream and the content, and obviously it's not going to be for everyone. It's really niche, and it is really aimed at sort of getting a foothold and getting started with Magento. The content isn't always going to be just me doing this and fucking up center alignment with, margin auto. We can actually have different conversations and obviously, in terms of a community, talk about whatever we want to talk about, really. And I'm up for people who've joined us today, and obviously tell your mates and get them in the chat and get them asking questions and things, and we can, because obviously I'm not, and by the way, I'm not saying I know all the answers and I'm sort of the guy who would sort of, I can just answer anything, but what I hopefully have got is the experience in the industry and working with Magento and anything really, not just Magento, go for anything, and we can just sort of have a conversation, and hopefully it's one of them things that you can have on in the background and you get something from it. So thank you for everyone who bothered to come on at 12 o'clock. I really appreciate it, and let's see if I can end the stream for real this time. But yeah, cheers everyone, enjoyed it, thank you, bye bye.